Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to another episode of the Artsy Raven, and today our special guest is Aziz Amna. She is the author of American Fever, which won the SABA Book Award and the APALA Award for Literature. Her work has been published in the New York Times, Aljazeera, Financial Times, and others. She is a graduate of Yale College and the Helen Zell Writers Program at the University of Michigan. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
So tell me a little bit about how you became a writer. How did it lead us to this moment?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Pakistan, as you know, anyone who might have read the book might be familiar with. And I was always a voracious reader. And when I was in my teenage years, I started writing for those sort of youth supplements that come with newspapers sometimes, like the youth section or the teen section or whatever. There would be, very tiny like letters to the editor or short essays based on personal experience. But it was something that I was dabbling in, obviously in a very juvenile fashion at a very young age. And then when I applied for colleges, I ended up getting into Yale University in the US. I came here and I majored in English in college and also took a bunch of creative writing classes that were affiliated with the English department. But afterwards, I was in New York and as an international student on a visa, an issue that is very timely right now, but I had a very limited number of options in terms of like employment that I could take because it would have to be a firm that would sponsor visas, and generally publishing houses and like even sort of journalism outfits don't really have the capacity to do that. And so I ended up working in finance and consulting for a few years. But at the same time, I was taking, writing classes in the evening. I was working on short pieces on the weekends. So I was writing in the evenings and weekends. It was in 2018 that I decided to apply for a fully funded MFA, Master's in Fine Arts in creative writing. I got into the University of Michigan, and that's sort of when the turning point was. That was when I allowed myself to start thinking of myself more seriously or more in a more full-time way as a writer.
Now, do you still work in finance or are you a full-time?
No. So when I started my MFA is when I ended that part of my life. And since then I wrote American Fever, the book that we'll be talking about. I have another book called The Splintering that comes out this year. And at the same time, I also had 2 children. So between
Oh
all
my
of
God,
that,
you're busy. Yeah.
I'm plenty of busy. Yes.
Now, how did your family feel about you doing an arts degree overseas? Like, I mean, were you one of the first to come over in your family?
Yes. I was the very first to study abroad. I'm very, very lucky because my parents, I know that I was recently at this talk. I was at a conference that was about, the Asian diaspora, and there were a lot of South Asians there and a lot of South Asians raised in the US, and a lot of them were legitimately so complaining about, parents who are not
Yes.
very, very understanding of their children going into creative fields. And thankfully, that was not my experience at all. My parents, from the very beginning, have been extremely supportive. My father himself, he worked as a civil servant his entire life, but he also now writes in his retirement. And so there was already always, the sort of respect for this sort of calling in my family. And my mother is the one who always got me my first book and made me want to be a writer in the first place. So thankfully, my family has always been very supportive, which I know, unfortunately, is not the case for a lot of people.
Yes, that's very lovely. Now, let's talk a little bit about your book, American Fever. It's a coming of age story. And so what inspired you to write this? And was anything taken from your life to put into the book?
Yeah, quite a lot. So as I think is the case with a lot of, debut novels. There was a lot of dipping into my own life. When I was 16 in Pakistan, I applied for and got into this fully funded exchange program that took me for a year to a family in rural Oregon, and that's where I stayed a year. And so, but this happened in 2008, and I only in 2018 did I look back and I was sort of thinking of, okay, what do I want to write? I want to now commit to a full book. This was when I was still working in finance, and I was like, I want to commit to writing a full book. What should I take on as my first subject? And I thought back to this experience, and I felt like enough years had elapsed that I could turn it into fiction, because I do think that it can sometimes be risky to take something that has just very recently happened and try to fictionalize it because it's just too close in your mind. So I felt like enough distance had elapsed, and so I took that as the basis. And of course, all the characters, the host parents, they're all completely different. A lot of what happens to the young protagonist, Hira, after she comes to the US is different. But that's sort of like that general. I wanted to take the idea of the foreign exchange student because I was interested in how they are visitors, but not necessarily immigrants. They're in that sort of liminal space between the two where they're not intending to fully assimilate into this new place because they're only there for a short amount of time, and yet they are encountering extreme difference, extreme, just a completely different world from what they're used to. And at the same time, when they're also coming at this very critical age of late adolescence, which is, I feel like, some of the most critical, fundamental, but also like a time when a lot of things can go wrong, right? So I was interested in merging the coming of age story with the Stranger Comes to America story.
Cool. Now, was there any age of your life that you reflected? I guess it's like mostly your teenage years, would you say, that you thought about? Or the time when you came to America, when you wrote the book?
So is the question that what time was I reflecting back on when yeah, I mean, I think it was a combination of the two times so the first time that I entered the US was for this exchange program that was just 10 months. I came here, I did that, and then I went back home. And the second time was when I came here for college, which ended up being for good because, I've never really left the US since. So I think the experiences that I draw on are from both those times, and of course also just from talking to other people and what their experiences have been. But I think my time in Oregon, which is reflected in the novel, was unique because a lot of the times when people come to the US, they come with this, sense of this American dream, or they move to a big city, or they move to like a major urban hub for employment or for education. And the first time that I came to the US, which was on the exchange program, I was sent to this very, very tiny town in Oregon, just near the Pacific Ocean, extremely impoverished, extremely cut off from the rest of the country, even let alone the rest of the world. And so that was just such a unique first entry into the
Was it a
US.
good experience? I hope so.
It was, I think, the people that I met, especially my host parents, I cannot be more thankful to them. They were just the most wonderful people. But I mean, as you can imagine, putting, a person raised in urban Pakistan in a pretty sheltered setting with, both parents were very protective, and then taking that person and putting them in this very, very different setting was obviously challenging in a lot of ways, but ways that I learned from. And so I wanted to put that into fiction, but at the same time also, as happens with fiction, you dramatize a few things, you sort of like make the character, you allow the character to act out in certain ways that you might not have done in real life. And so I allowed the protagonist to be a lot angrier, for instance, than I remember being.
Okay. Now, were there any challenges you felt the character faced that were meaningful? Like, did they have a conflict that you really like? Also, are we giving away too much by asking you this?
Um, I think a lot of it came down to how she felt like the adults in her life should take care of her, or care for her. And I think, again, that's such a tricky age because she's 16 when she comes in, and she feels like she's almost an adult, so she should be able to take care of herself. But at the same time, particularly in a setting where you don't know anything, and particularly when you come from a place where you've been mostly fully taken care of in every way, the way you eat, what you eat, who's responsible for taking you around, who's obviously responsible for you financially, which is another thing that sort of changes for her when she comes here. And suddenly you go from that very protective setting to one in which you are told to fully fend for yourself. And I think that the book grapples a lot with the question of, with young people, like how much do the adults in their lives still owe them, and what is the sort of separation between independence that they want at that time, but also don't really know what to do with if they're given it.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, like, what kind of central themes did you want people to take away from the book? I think you sort of answered it.
Yeah,
Um, Now, did writing the story change your perspective of looking back on your own past, do you think?
that's a great question. I think so. I think that writing the book, I mean, I didn't, and I don't think I ever recommend writing as, or writing publicly as therapy, because I think, therapy is therapy, and maybe writing a diary is therapy, but obviously you shouldn't write a whole novel just to provide therapy to your past self. But I do think that a lot of times when you're, because what I think what the biggest thing that allows you to do is, when you're experiencing your own life, you're only experiencing it as yourself. Whereas when you write it out or when you fictionalize it, you're able to or not able to, you have to put yourself into the shoes of all characters. And so while I experienced all those events, just as a young person, when I wrote the book, I had to write the host parents part. I had to write her parents part. I had to write the part of the school friends for being slightly racist to her or just generally ignorant. And so you're able to just have a much more 360 view when you write fiction that's based on your life. And of course that can lead to, or that did lead to realizations of, oh, this person might have done it, or this person might have said this because they didn't know any better, or because they had genuinely never met someone like Hira in their lives. And so yes, it definitely gives you a lot more perspective.
Okay, now let's move away a little bit from the book and let's talk about your writing process a little bit. Like, you sound
Mhm.
very busy with two kids. So how do you write? Where do you find time to write?
Yeah, so it has changed a lot since. So this book was written before I became a mother. It was in fact sold right before no, I actually was sold the year after I became a mother, but it was finished. Mostly all of the editing was done before. So with the second book, it was written very much in the throes of motherhood. My elder son was like 2 years old. My daughter was newborn, like 3 months or something. And what I remember doing was, and then we were in Michigan when I finished American Fever, but right after that, we moved to New Jersey to be much closer to our family, to my husband's family. And so 3 days a week, I would just go over to their house, lock myself up in the basement where I could only hear muffled cries from
I'll hear
upstairs.
the children.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah, but had to tune that out. And just so 3 days a week, I would just be in that basement writing. And the rest of the time, it's not, I had to majorly adjust to that motherhood time where, you wake up, and if you could just sit at your desk and just do nothing all day, or then you can, in the middle of the day, if you pick up your computer and you can start writing on a whim, that is no longer really a possibility for me. I have to very much plan, okay, these are my writing days, and then get everything done. What has been a benefit of that is that it is incredible how much more productive you can be when you have very strict time limitations, as opposed to when it's just this wide empty canvas of time. So that is a silver lining, that I feel like I'm now much more productive in the time that I do have.
So how did you get American Fever published? Like, were you looking for an agent? Is that how it happened?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough that my agent approached me, which again, for writers who are listening in, or aspiring writers, aspiring novelists, everyone who writes as a writer, but aspiring published writers. A lot of times it helps if you have pieces out in magazines, because then agents are always on the lookout. They read these pieces, and especially if you have a website, or if that article says like the writer can be contacted at, etc. Or a lot of the times people who are looking to publish soon or to get an agent soon will include it in their short bio. Oh, XYZ is working on a novel or is working on a nonfiction project. So my agent reached out to me, and then I started working with him. We submitted separately in the UK and the US. And in the UK, it was very easy to sell. It took like a week and it was off. But in the US, it was on the market for a long time, because I'm not entirely sure why that is,
Yeah,
but
well, it's based in the US, the book.
that's
Yeah.
sort of what our running assumption was to do. We went in thinking that it would be the reverse. We thought the UK would be a hard sell because there's no link to the UK, whereas in the US it's set here. It's called American Fever. But it's just the vagaries of the publishing world. You just never know. So it took a while to sell in the US, and yeah, I mean and then it ended up having two different publishers in the UK and the US, and two different covers and all of that. But that's sort of how the publishing process went. Yeah.
Well, so your second book, has that been sold yet, or are you still working on it?
Yes. So the second book is also sold. It comes out in the UK and Commonwealth in this fall, in September, and then next spring it will be available in the US.
Oh, okay. Is it a similar theme to American Fever?
No, it
Okay.
is completely different. It's about a woman who wants to get very, very rich and will
Oh,
do anything to get
okay.
there. Yeah.
Could be a good thing or a bad thing, I guess. But
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay, Dar, so you're going to do a little bit of a reading for us. Could you give us a little bit of context, and then you can jump into the reading?
Yeah, so I was thinking of reading from the beginning of the novel, so hopefully we shouldn't need too much context, but the novel is a coming of age story about a young girl named Hira. She's 16 years old, and she's living in a city in Pakistan, and she applies for an exchange program that allows her to go on a fully funded year-long trip to the US, and she's placed with a family in rural Oregon. I think that is all. The host mother's name is Kelly. The host sister's name is Amy. And I think that's really all that we need to know to begin the novel. January. By God, I had planned to keep it to myself and God. But then the sheet speckled red. Blood, like pomegranate jewels, spots the pillowcase. It's the night of Kelly's wedding. The Pacific Northwest has received a flurry of snow, and as I get out of bed to gargle away the metal from my mouth, I wonder how the drops of red will look on the pristine white of the patio. I wonder if the blood means the disease is now severe, even lethal. Mostly, I wonder how much of this is America's doing. In the morning, I go out to the living room where Kelly and Ethan are nursing their coffees, clearly hungover. I tell Kelly she has to take me to the doctor. She still has mascara on from last night. Can this wait, Hera? I shake my head, tell her it must be today, and my host mother's face sets into annoyance, which is doubly unfortunate because she and I shared a rare tender moment last night. This must not be how she and Ethan had planned to spend the first morning of their marriage, but I can't drive and she is the adult in charge, so this is how it has to be. In the car ride to the doctor's, I try to make conversation, telling her I had a great time attending my first American wedding. Kelly loves it when I posit myself as a virgin to America, so that cheers her up a bit. I also mentioned that I spoke with Ali on the phone after the party. So, are you two dating now? He lives in New York. I'm going back to Pakistan in 5 months. Yes, but life is long, she says. And you're smart. I'll be shocked if you don't find your way back to America. You're assuming I want to. See, that's my problem. Kelly's doing me a favor by driving me around the day after her wedding. Why can't I keep my mouth shut? Well, she says, frowning, they do say it's the land of opportunity. Kelly lives in rural Oregon, where the state of opportunity is such that I haven't been able to find an after-school job in 5 months. But it's 2011, America is still king of the world, and the cool guy is in the White House, and Kelly can't comprehend the rest of the world not clamoring for these shores. I just hope you see your own potential, she continues. If you remain in Pakistan, I'll always worry about your safety. Again, it's 2011, and Americans are worried about everyone else's safety, stated in the knowledge that their nook of the world is far safer than elsewhere, although don't tell them why that might be. History is what happens in other places. America transcends it. This will all change, but at the time, I can merely nod. Leaving home isn't easy, I say, offering my own banality in response to hers. And you've already done it at such a young age, she replies, upbeat as we take the Eugene exit. Mark my words, you'll be back in no time. My mother tells me that the first time she returned to Hamburg, she cried every morning for California. Did you ever ask her how many times she cried for Hamburg? Kelly sighed. I am so bloody difficult. She is much happier here. I pinched back my tongue and changed the subject to the honeymoon. Kelly and Ethan are leaving for Hawaii next week. But I don't buy it, that thing she says about her mother. Of course, one can be happy anywhere. Certain zip codes help, and yet none are necessary. But it is Kelly's certainty that irks me. Her mother must have done what many immigrants do, create neat narratives for their children, flimsy accounts of one-way movement that they begin to internalize. A lie told often enough becomes the truth. And perhaps these accounts are not lies, but simply omissions that elide over how home is forever that other place. The first one to drive you to despair, the lover you took before learning to externalize the deeds of the world. It is the sole landscape of dreams, the only place that will ever convince you that its failings, its bounties, its successes and caresses are all your own. After all, where does it end and you begin? The doctor is a lean man with suspiciously white teeth who asks me to repeat my name. I want to get it right, he insists, and I smile as if I haven't heard that 100 times already. I tell him about the cough that sits like a nail in my throat, the fever that comes and goes, the fatigue that burrows into my body each afternoon. He nods. How long have you had the cough? 3 months. He raises his eyebrows. And you're just seeing someone now? I thought it was a winter cold. He shakes his head in disappointment, typing away at his computer. Also, I begin because it is no longer a thing that I can keep myself to myself and God. I coughed up blood last night. The doctor swivels in his chair to face me. Blood? Kelly looks up from her phone. You didn't tell me that, Hira. I just saw it this morning. Do you have night chills? Doctor asks. Yes. Productive cough? Productive? Is there phlegm? Yes. He glances down at my file. It says here you are from Pakistan? I nod. How long have you been in America? 5 months. Were you sick while you were in Pakistan? Not exactly, is the answer. No, I tell the doctor, my eyes falling to the faint scar on my arm. He writes down some tests, looking grim. I take the elevator to the lab where the nurse asks me to cough vigorously into a tube. Then she ties a tourniquet around my arm and feels for a promising vein. I look away towards the window, which overlooks low-lying buildings flanked by fir. Spencer Butte sits in the distance under a blanket of snow. When I arrived in Oregon last summer, evenings would linger forever, the sky full of pink promise even at dinner time. Now it is not yet 4, but the sun has grown meek, leaving behind the unmistakable blue of dawn. Perhaps that is the only thing common between here and home, the cruelty of a January evening. The nurse will call tomorrow. Let's hope for the best, the doctor says when I return to his office, looking very much like he is hoping for no such thing. Kelly is quiet in the car. I wonder if I should call Ali when I get home. What will he say? That I shouldn't assume the worst, that the tests come back, it might not be what I think it is. The sort of stuff people say to buy time to react to someone else's misery. As for my parents, I decide I'll wait till the next day. After the nurse has called and confirmed what I already sense is true, and I have thanked her and she has hung up, I will not put down the receiver, but instead dial that +92 home. And I will tell my parents with the certainty of iron that I'm terribly sick and it's their fault. All right.
Well, thank you very much for spending time with us here.
Yeah, of course. It's lovely to be here.
For more upcoming episodes of the Artsy Raven about writing and publishing, visit us at jfgarrard.com/arpodcast. A reminder to Patreon subscribers that there is bonus content available for every episode on the Patreon website. If you enjoyed the show, you can show your appreciation by buying us some digital coffee. The Artsy Raven is produced by J.F. Garrard. The voice in the show's introduction is Chris Gorman, and music is by Tim Moore. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe.